The night over Ethiopia's Afar region felt unnaturally heavy, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. A faint crimson glow shimmered on the horizon, dancing against the drifting desert dust. It was the kind of glow that made animals restless and sent an instinctive shiver down the spine of anyone who saw it. For centuries, this land had lived with fire, volcanoes, tremors, storms of heat, but tonight, there was something different in the air. Something ancient, something awakening. Abib, a young shepherd who knew every crack and shadow of the desert, stood alone on a rocky slope, his sheep gathered nervously behind him. Normally, they slept peacefully at this hour. But not tonight. They stomped, bleated, and jerked their heads toward the distant silhouette of Eruption, the legendary, smoking mountain. The volcano looked alive, pulsing like a beating heart beneath the earth. Abib wiped sweat from his brow. He had stood here countless nights before, yet he had never seen the mountain glow so fiercely. A metallic scent crept through the wind, sharp and unnatural, making him swallow uneasily. Far away, inside the Afar Rift Observatory, a group of scientists hunched over blinking monitors. The room was cluttered with maps, screens, and geological instruments that suddenly seemed far too fragile. The seismometers beeped louder and faster, alarming enough to make even seasoned professionals tense. Dr. Layla Hassan, who had dedicated her entire career to studying the complex tectonic systems of East Africa, stared at the readings with disbelief tightening her face. This pressure, it's rising too fast, she murmured. Her colleague adjusted another dial, only for the graphs to spike harder. This isn't normal volcanic activity, he said. The movement is deeper. It's the rift. Before they could discuss further, the ground trembled violently. Books fell from shelves, a glass beaker shattered, and lights flickered. The tremor was long and deep, as if the earth was shifting its weight. The team rushed outside instinctively, seeking open ground. As they stumbled out, the night sky erupted into a terrifying spectacle. A massive plume of lava burst from Eruption's crater with a roar that drowned out every other sound. It shot upward like a fiery geyser, scattering sparks across the sky. Rivers of molten rock snaked down the black slopes, their heat so intense that the air shimmered in waves. The ground beneath the scientists' feet seemed to pulse, responding to some enormous force moving underground. Then it happened, swift, violent, unforgettable. A crack ripped across the desert floor. It didn't form slowly or quietly. It tore. The earth split apart with a deafening groan that echoed like mountains grinding against each other. Dust shot into the air. Rocks tumbled. A jagged line carved itself into the earth within seconds, stretching across the barren land faster than any of them could process. Dr. Layla stepped back in shock, her heart pounding. The rift is expanding, she whispered. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of a truth she had feared for years. What unfolded before them wasn't merely a volcanic eruption, it was a geological shift of monumental scale. Africa was tearing open. At that moment, a small crew led by environmental journalist Dhruv Rathi arrived near the site. Dhruv had come to document climate and geological changes in the region, but nothing had prepared him for this. He grabbed his camera immediately, pointing it toward the inferno. This is unprecedented, he said breathlessly. We are witnessing the creation of a massive rift, right now, in real time. The ground rumbled again, and another split opened, smaller but no less alarming. Lava oozed into the widening fractures, giving the illusion that the earth was bleeding fire. The heat radiating from the eruption was unbearable, forcing everyone to shield their faces. Even at a distance, the scorching air felt like standing in front of an open furnace. Villagers from the nearby settlements began to flee, their silhouettes illuminated by the rising flames. Mothers held children close. Men herded goats away from the danger. The desert filled with the chaotic sound of yelling, crying, and the distant roar of the earth itself. The people here had survived droughts, heatwaves, and ancient volcanic cycles, but none of them had seen the ground open like this. One elder paused to stare at the glowing crack stretching across the plain. His voice trembled as he said, "The land is changing. The earth is breaking apart." He wasn't wrong. Scientists had long known that the African continent sat on two major tectonic plates slowly drifting apart. But what they were witnessing now was the process accelerating, visibly, dramatically. The Afar Depression, already one of the thinnest points in the Earth's crust, was behaving like a wound that had finally burst open. Dhruv continued filming. This is more than volcanic activity, he narrated. This is a sign of something much larger happening, the literal splitting of Africa. The crack continued to widen, a deep, dark canyon where there had been flat desert hours earlier. The roar of the volcano grew louder, like an ancient beast waking from a long sleep. Sparks drifted across the sky, swirling in the heated winds. Clouds of smoke piled upward, blotting out the stars and turning the world beneath into a surreal red haze. Abib, still standing on the ridge, looked on with a mixture of fear and awe. He felt the ground vibrate under his feet, as if the earth had a heartbeat. His sheep huddled close, trembling. He didn't understand the science, but he understood the danger. This was not just a volcano. This was the land itself being reshaped. As the night deepened, the lava spread across the desert, lighting the darkness like rivers of fire. The crack grew longer, deeper, unstoppable. Every tremor underlined the message that nature was trying to send, a warning that something far bigger, far more powerful was in motion. And beneath the shifting earth of Ethiopia, the continent of Africa continued to pull itself apart, step by fiery step. The first light of morning crept slowly across the Afar desert, revealing a landscape that looked nothing like the one that had existed only hours earlier. The once flat plains were now scarred by a deep, jagged wound stretching as far as the eye could see. Smoke drifted lazily from the ground, rising in thin, twisting shapes that glowed gold in the sun. The air smelled of ash, minerals, and something metallic, as if the earth's insides had been exposed to the sky. Scientists from across Ethiopia and neighboring countries arrived through the night, their helicopters thudding over the rift until the desert sand swirled in spirals. When they landed, the ground vibrated beneath their boots. It wasn't the sudden, violent shaking from the night before. This was a slow, steady pulse, like the earth breathing. It was unsettling in a way none of them wanted to admit aloud. Dr. Layla Hassan walked carefully near the edge of the newly formed chasm. The crack was wider than she had ever seen in photographs or geological archives, nearly 20 meters across in some places and unimaginably deep. She kicked a pebble over the edge and watched it fall into the darkness. It never hit anything visible. It formed in a matter of hours, she said to a nearby technician. A valley like this takes thousands, sometimes millions, of years. But here, it happened overnight. The plates must have shifted suddenly. Dhruv Rathi, who barely slept, had been filming since dawn. He moved cautiously along the edge, capturing the destroyed huts, abandoned animal pens, and the endless line of fractured earth cutting the landscape in two. He spoke into his camera with a tone that balanced awe with alarm. This is no longer a remote scientific theory. Africa is literally tearing itself apart beneath our feet. This rift isn't a prediction anymore, it's happening. Near the temporary camp set up for displaced villagers, Abib sat with his family under a cloth shade. He watched workers unload water, food, and blankets from trucks. His face showed exhaustion, but also a strange calm. The kind that comes only after witnessing something far beyond human understanding. The ground was talking yesterday, he murmured to another shepherd. Like it wanted us to hear its pain. Around them, dozens of families huddled together. Mothers comforted frightened children, elders whispered prayers. Some stared blankly at the horizon, still trying to comprehend that the land they had lived on their whole lives, land they believed stable and eternal, had torn open in the span of a single night. As Dhruv approached, some villagers pointed at the widening crack, explaining in their own languages what they had seen. Dhruv listened intently before turning to the camera again. This region is home to millions of people. They depend on this land for farming, herding, and living. A geological change of this scale could alter their entire future. Meanwhile, near the chasm, a team of geologists set up scanning devices to measure heat and movement. A young scientist shouted out readings. The temperature in the fissure is rising. There's magma movement beneath. Another scientist scribbled in her notebook. If subsidence continues, this area might sink further. They weren't exaggerating. Parts of the ground near the rift had already dropped several meters overnight, forming sudden bowls filled with steaming water, miniature volcanic lakes created in a few hours. Steam hissed through cracks that hadn't existed a day before. Some rocks were still too hot to touch. Dr. Layla sat with Dhruv for an interview. The desert wind blew strands of hair across her face as she spoke. This is part of the East African rift system, she explained. The Somali plate and the Nubian plate have been slowly drifting apart for millions of years. But the eruption accelerated the process. It's like the earth made a sudden jerk. Will Africa really split? Dhruv asked. Eventually, yes, she answered calmly. Maybe in a million years, maybe sooner. But what you see here is the beginning of a new ocean, a sea that will separate two massive pieces of Africa. Dhruv turned to the camera with a look of astonishment. Imagine that, a brand new ocean forming right here in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and the entire Rift Valley region. This will change coastlines, climates, trade routes, and how millions of people live. Later that afternoon, helicopters flew overhead again, bringing more researchers. The hum of machinery filled the desert as drones entered the chasm to map its depth. Screens showed images of molten rock glowing deep below. It's like looking into the early Earth, one researcher said, mesmerized. But amidst the scientific excitement, the human cost was visible. A village elder approached Drive. Layla with concern etched on his face. We have lived here for generations, he said. Where will we go now? The land is breaking. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You will not be alone. We will help you relocate. And the world is watching. By sunset, the desert was bathed in orange light. The towering smoke from Erta Ale still painted the sky with streaks of red and black. The crack glowed faintly on the inside, illuminated by magma flowing far below. Every now and then, the ground trembled, not violently, but enough to remind everyone that the Earth's transformation was far from over. Dhruv stood silently at the edge, filming the final shots of the day. His expression was thoughtful, almost troubled. After a long pause, he began speaking into the camera. This is a warning from our planet. A reminder that Earth is alive, moving, changing, and we are just tiny observers standing on its shifting surface. He looked out over the horizon where the glowing mountains loomed. What began last night wasn't just an eruption. It was the next chapter in Africa's story, a story that will continue long after we are gone. The wind blew across the desert, carrying dust and whispers of heat. The crack stretched silently into the darkness, wide and unstoppable, as if nature itself had drawn a line across the land to mark the beginning of a new age. And somewhere deep beneath Ethiopia, the tectonic plates continued to drift apart, slowly, powerfully, and inevitably.